Good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about HIV/AIDS and the transmission of HIV/AIDS into the human being. We'll also be talking about a little bit about melanin and how melanin plays a part in HIV transmission. Now, before we get into this discussion, there are a couple of things surrounding the HIV/AIDS epidemic, or so-called epidemic, that we need to know about. Number one, when you're talking about AIDS, HIV/AIDS, the epidemic has been grossly exaggerated to make you think that there are a whole bunch of people infected with this virus who are really not infected with the virus. Some of the motivation behind this is to feed into certain notions that people of color or African people are somehow all diseased. That's one part of it. The other part of it is to deal with the revenue that is generated from this so-called disease. So I want to make that clear right off the bat. The other part is dealing with the fact that there are many people who go in to get tested for HIV/AIDS who get a result of positive. Now, a positive HIV/AIDS result does not necessarily mean that you have this disease. If you were to test a pregnant woman for HIV/AIDS, her result will come back positive. So there's certain foods that you can eat that will create or trigger a positive read on your test. So we haven't even looked at, as a community, the number of people in the community who have been diagnosed with this disease who never had it to begin with. And then when they take AZT or one of the protease inhibitor drugs, they actually come down with HIV/AIDS because it destroys their immune system. So there's a lot of obscurity when it comes to this HIV/AIDS epidemic that we're going to try to address, just the transmission piece today, but that we're going to have those conversations at some point. The other piece, as I mentioned earlier, is melanin. And for those of you who don't know what melanin is the pigment and polymer molecule that gives people of color pigment, gives them their color, gives black people the color black, and other people of color their color. This melanin is a very unique molecule. The properties it exhibits are really beyond the scope of this presentation, but just to give you a few things about melanin, we have pigment, which gives us our color. We have melanin in the eyes, which gives your eyes the dark color that it has, dark brown color that your eyes have. There's also something that is called neuromelanin, and the neuromelanin is secreted by the pineal gland and helps the body to calibrate, helps the body to get into the right frequency, helps you to synchronize. So melanin has a lot to do with the body's internal clock. Your heart beats at a certain rhythm and you don't control that. It just beats on its own, and the melanin helps to facilitate this. Also facilitates muscle movement, motor movement, deals with sleep, deals with energy. It is the major facilitator in the entire human body and helps to maintain proper homeostasis. So melanin is very critical in the human being. Other things about melanin that you might want to know about: people of color who live in the northern climates are vitamin D deficient because they do not get enough sunlight, and this is because they do not energize their skeletal system and they do not recharge their melanin. Melanin allows you to pull vitamin D from the sun, converts to vitamin D3, goes to the liver, and transmits to the whole body through the metabolism of the liver. So vitamin D is an essential component for body homeostasis, but you would not be able to get adequate amounts if you did not spend enough time in the sun utilizing your melanin. So there's a couple of things about it. The word melanin comes from the Greek molass. You all heard of molass, which means molasses, or you heard of blackberry molasses. We've heard of that. Melan comes into the Latin, which means black. So when you talk about melanin, you're talking about black substance, a black pigment that not only exists in the human being, but also exists in plant life. It also exists in the earth and also in the universe. So this melanin is a very, very critical component to homeostasis. Now, we're going to talk about today, again, as I said, about HIV/AIDS and how you transmit HIV/AIDS into a human being. and melanin plays a part into this, and we'll get into that in a second. But there are two main viruses that are associated with HIV/AIDS. Before HIV/AIDS came on the scene in the late 1970s, early 80s, these viruses that are called retroviruses were virtually unheard of. They never existed, which brings into question what is the origin of AIDS, and is it a real virus? A subgroup of retroviruses are called lentiviruses. Lentiviruses are viruses that have a latent stage, which means that when you contract this disease or you have poor immunity and you develop this disease, it takes a long time for the symptoms to present themselves. Or if you contract HIV/AIDS, you carry it around for 5 years, then all of a sudden it pops up. So these are a new class of viruses that never existed off the face of the planet in history. So we have to look at that and have those conversations. So when we're talking about AIDS and the transmission of it, we're dealing with two viruses. One of them is a bovine leukemia virus, which is a virus that is found in cattle. The other virus is a sheep visna virus. And we're going to get into that and how this works and how you transmit HIV/AIDS into a human being. We're talking about HIV/AIDS. There are two viruses that are associated with the development of this retrovirus. And when scientists first discovered HIV, so-called discovered, they called it a cancer virus because it was a T-cell attacker. And that's how you got all of these so-called retroviruses. But the primary viruses that are associated with HIV/AIDS are two. One is called a sheep visna virus. And I'll put this right here for you. Sheep